media and why we need media planning from the bottom up. MSNBC, Fox, CNN, that's top-down corporate news. And there's massive public relations firms. WPP, Omnicom just merged with the French Public Group, now they're the biggest in the world. These PR firms, no, that's not against the law to lie to the public. Or mislead.
Didn't it used to be against the law?
No, it's not.
It's never.
It's an FCC rule, but it's not against the law. But everything we're seeing is being spun and packaged by public relations people in these massive corporations. These are 200,000 people in the world working for these big corporations that take on as clients the State Department, the Pentagon, Monsanto, and are creating news stories, working full time at it. So our job is to understand that what we're seeing in what we visualize as the corporate media, even though the PD is now locally owned. It's owned by growth promoters primarily. What we're getting is stories from AP, stories from the New York Times Wire, particularly international stories, and op-eds from very similar sources that are all top-down. They're designed to keep us like mushrooms. You know how mushrooms are raised? They're raised in the dark and fed a lot of manure. That's on purpose. This is not an accident. So we don't need corporate media. We put together 25 independent news sources and their RSS feeds on our website that would literally give you all the news you need to know in the world. And from non-corporate sources. I don't watch television. My wife likes to watch, what's happening locally. But it's all entertainment and sensationalism, and that's deliberate. And I read the Press Democrat every day, but I'm far more interested in the Empire section than I am in what the international stuff. But I can certainly see how they're spinning things and what's being played. And usually I already knew the story from online sources, from all over. So our job as activists, grassroots activists, is one, to help people understand that corporate media is misleading us and they are in service to the 1%. And that we have to be in service to ourselves in terms of information and understanding. So building all pieces of media, and certainly the internet gives us some opportunities to do that even more, and sharing that on a broad scale is vital. So whatever your individual issues are, whatever the group wants to do, the goal is not to get a story in the PD. That just reinforces that the PD is a place that is a good place to read what's going on in the world. We need to get stories so that people can trust that what we're doing is better than what corporate media is trying to do. Print's expensive. We did the North Bay Progressive for 4 years, put out 48 issues, and just could never find the right combination of subscribers and advertisers to get enough money to make it work. And we were a couple, 3,000 in debt, and we said, whoa, that's just, we had a big party, paid off the debt, and called it. That was that. Yeah, but it was fun to do. Michael's done the big Occupy newspapers. You guys put out how many of those?
6.
Huh?
6 editions.
6 editions, but you printed up how many on each?
Yeah, 50,000.
50,000, yeah.
50,000.
Yeah. That's hard to do. I mean, it's a lot of work to put out a newspaper. The websites are getting incredibly easy. Now, any of you could write up a 400-word summary of what you had tonight. And I would imagine, could they post it on the website you guys have?
Not yet, but we're upgrading the
You're
website.
getting there, but you could post it on Indie Media tonight at midnight.
Yep.
Indie Media San Francisco.
And the whole world will know.
And it's available to the whole world.
Put it on our
I make all my
Facebook
students
page.
publish. When they do investigative research, part of the course is they have to publish. Some have been in the PD, some have been in the Bohemian, some have been in the other papers around, but all of them at least published on Indie Media.
What is it, Indie Media?
Indie Media, indmedia.org, which came out of the Seattle protests 13 years ago now. And there's like 160 sites worldwide, but it's open publication.
It's just indie.org?
indmedia.org. And then if you get the main one, then there'll be all the regional ones, so you can go to indiemedia.bay. Indie Bay, I think is what it is, but you'll click on it. There's San Francisco and there's Indie Bay, there's two here. And you can publish your story right there. And then you can link it on Facebook to all your friends.
If you publish it one, does it go in automatically, or you've got to separately post?
On all the Indie Medias?
Yeah.
No, there's just one, each site is separate.
Okay.
But I don't think there's some conglomeration, but it's not, I don't know if I don't think you can search the whole system. They're all over the world. That Indie Media folks in Italy, all over the place, So, I mean, so that's part of what I think we need to be thinking about. Can you add into that, Mike? You want to add into any of that?
Yeah, it's what, I think about this stuff all the time, how to penetrate the mainstream while doing what you're doing, which is what you're saying, which is establishing credentials and credibility and professionalism in the alternative sphere that you're working in. And I'm kind of convinced that I don't think that unless we figure out a way to get ourselves into the mainstream, which say Occupy did, we did change the language of the country. And now inequality, and those articles are running daily in newspapers across the country. Edward Snowden changed the language of national security. Now we talk about it more openly than we've done ever. Like, these events can shift the dialogue, and then it's in the mainstream, and then there's a chance now legislation's getting written, and now policy gets changed. And I think my goal is really to take us from these hundreds of websites, like you're mentioning in the media, the truth outs and the alternates, and there's so many alternative websites that we're all scrambling in the morning to read what news we want, and how many sites you're going to go to, and where you're going to get your news. The issue is that we're all in this alternative media sphere, and where policy and important decision-making happens isn't necessarily where the news that we're reading. It's like they don't square up, right? Because, like you're saying, the AP and the mainstream media is on another plane. And I'm really concerned and wondering how we're going to make like a breaking story. Say we break stories all the time on Occupy.com, as you do too on Project Censored. So when is a mainstream, when is the Washington Post or the New York Times, when will one of those stories that we produce in the alternative sphere actually leapfrog its way into the mainstream, so that it goes beyond being like sort of in a bit of an echo chamber in the alternative sphere? I mean, do you feel like that's sort of the crisis that we're in a way? That we're two different media
Partly, but
blocks?
I don't think we can think of it as how we can leap into the mainstream. We are the mainstream.
Yeah.
They're the corporate media. And if we think of them that way, then we can just dismiss them. as entertainment and lies.
But until it reaches them, no one actually discusses it as though it is mainstream until it gets in the mainstream in a way, right? Like it's considered conspiracy or...
We are the mainstream. If we think of ourselves that way, then we can promote democracy now, which they have their problems. But there's plenty of media out there, writers, magazines, radio, television. The best news source right now in the world is RT. Russia Today. No question about it. In English. And you can see daily news there. You can see Abby Martin and her breaking the set stuff, and you can see her, take on the dismissals of Snowden, things like that.
But I think the question he's asking, which is the same one I have, is how do you reach the soccer moms, the folks who don't even know about
People in the
those
Matrix.
outlets?
Yeah.
Yeah, people in the Matrix. That's a very good way to put it. Yeah.
That's where a campaign comes in. You use every possible source of media that you can get to.
And snowballing. The more that people read what we are writing, the more that it will be part of the discussion. And the more it's part of the discussion, the more the kids are going to come home and say, Mom, did you know about? No. Where'd you find out about that? Oh, it was on this media feed and this. And that's how we're going to get the soccer moms. It's not they're not the first target.
I had an interesting experience in terms of penetrating, especially the Press Democrat, as I've been organizing against an orchard, a vineyard that they want to put next to my son's school. And so I formed a group called Apple Roots. And
What?
Apple Roots is kind of the name of this group I created with about 4 other people. And I had probably 5 different encounters with Matt Brown over a period of about 9 weeks. And I had 4 demands, and I was kind of, what?
Who is Matt Brown?
Matt Brown's a writer for the Press Democrat, kind of Empire News. And finally, when we had a picket outside Paul Hobbs' winery, which is the one that wants to put this vineyard with toxic chemicals right next to the school, he finally put 3 of my 4 demands in that article. And I'm not quite sure what went into, because one was a moratorium on new vineyards in this county. 2 was for all the vineyards to adopt organic or biodynamic, and the 3rd was to look at how do we want to use our farmland, really. And he put, I forget what the 4th one was. I think the 4th one was revoke Hobbs' permit, but he put 3 of them in, which I've been trying for 8 weeks to try and get in there, and and there was a sort of snowball effect between the Sonoma County West Times with David Abbott, who interviewed me, and a timely piece on Channel 2 News about toxic pesticides on strawberries and the issue of drift, and the timing of the picket outside of his winery couldn't have been better, And when we were at the protest, I just decided to trust my gut, and I basically just talked to Matt like he wasn't a reporter, he was just a person. And I talked a little bit about what it's been like to organize, what's been hard, what's been easy. We joked, we laughed. I didn't treat him as this person that I was going to be doing talking points with. And I was curious to see what kind of article would show up that day in the Press Democrat. And it was okay. And he was like, well, what are you going to do next? What can we expect? And I'm like, well, I told him some ideas, but...
And how did you encounter him? Did he come to the debate?
Well, what happened was a group of moms kind of exposed the fact that there's this vineyard on Water Trough Road going to surround Apple Blossom Elementary School. So I decided to have an action called Decorate the Gate, meaning decorate the gate to the orchard. And I put out a press release, very minimal amount of work, and a photographer of the Press Democrat, Matt Brown, showed up. And I talked to him for about a half hour. And then basically, I had 4 more actions, and he covered 3 of them. So, and I talked to him on the phone, and, you know,
So you did like he was talking about where you established a personal relationship.
yeah, where I think maybe he's maybe trusting me more, that I'm, you know, working hard, and, you know, brought out 50 people on a Monday at noon, you know, to pick it outside this guy's winery, and, you know. And the flip side to it is hard fucking work. It was exhausting to have kind of grinded away for so long. So, it, you know, it isn't something that's necessarily sustainable either, you know.
How many letters to the editor have you had in them?
There were a lot.
I know.
There were a
You
lot
guys got
of
a lot.
letters to the editor, and that helped. There were actually a whole group of people that were like writing letters on a daily basis about the orchard conversion, about the issue of pesticide drift, about corporate agribusiness dominating decisions about how we use our land. So there were a lot of letters to the editor. There was a lot of synergy on Facebook between and Wacko, you know, where I go from my Apple Roots page to Occupy Sonoma County to some other sites that I've created that are kind of wacky, like Overthrow Monsanto, you know. But I'd find 500 saw this, 600 saw this. You know, I'd even post something silly. Well, I've been organizing all day and now I'm going to bed. You know, 600 people saw it. Like, that's silly. But, and actually going to the Press Democrats, the article itself, and posting under the article to maybe add something that was missed, or, you know, there's so many haters though that troll the Press Democrat and just have nothing but nasty things to say. Those people are, but, you know, and I talked to the reporter, Matt, about, well, school's going to start, and my next place is I want to reach out to the parents that have kids in these schools and get them involved, because it's going to take more than a half dozen people to move this beyond just an orchard to the whole issue of we're just living in this big pesticide exposed county.
Well, I'd like to speak to what you just said. You did a great job, and you got what you needed, and to date. Now I'm going to pop your balloon just a little bit. You had the perfect story. You had the winery, you had schools, you had moms and parents and organizations, you had kids, and you had health issues, and you had, so all those things are Mother Earth. These people over here breathe, you know, they eat and breathe that stuff all the time. You had the perfect story. It was the perfect storm story, although disguised as a school and a vineyard.
Right.
Now your challenge, of course, is to get some media attention on something much larger.
Yeah.
And that is where they may go, whoa, wait a minute, we saved the kids, and
Right.
we're not going to have an orchard in the schoolyard, but
Make every
Yeah,
vineyard
pesticides.
organic.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Farm Bureau's gonna blow.
Oh yeah, Tony's.
then you go against the big guns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Stop whining.
Yeah, because you can get kind of ghettoized. Oh, it's like, oh, of course, no one wants pesticides on kids, and, you know.
But on
yeah.
farm workers and on food, that's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
And wineries, how could you be against wineries?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and another last piece is that the Board of Supervisors is so insulated from the people. If you want to get an item on the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors, you have to go through the department that covers what you're concerned about in order to get an agenda item on the Board of Supervisors, or through a particular representative, which for me is Dr. Cabrillo, who's off in rehab. But if I wanted to get the issue of pesticide drift, of the whole issue of, you know, big big agribusiness dominating decisions about, then I would have to go through Tony, the ag commissioner. And he's not gonna let nothing like that get onto the board of supervisors. So essentially, in many ways, we're locked out. And so in my mind, I thought, okay, well, let's pick it out front of Tony. I mean, we sort of go as far as we can. You know, I guess there's probably pros and cons to doing that. But to kind of then confront, okay, well, this is a barrier that we're encountering in terms of the ag commissioner really only representing, you know.
Well, there's a new health lady who the other health.
We could definitely take in her office, yeah.
Yeah,
She doesn't know anything about fluoridation of the water, but maybe she might know something about pesticides.
yeah.
Who's that?
The new lady that's the.
Lynn Silver, Charlotte.
Okay, whoever needs to sign in still? Oh.
So it's kind of like Occupy, as long as they were just camping out in front of the city hall and it was a tent violation, that sort of thing, that we care a lot. Or they did, but I mean, it wasn't like they weren't gonna get repressed, but the minute they started going to the banks,
Oh.
that got serious,
Oh.
you know? And saying, you know, disavow or occupy this, and that, I mean, that got, then there was crackdowns. But if there's enough folks, like in Oakland, you can't shut down the port. You could shut down the city. I mean, ultimately, Occupy is about non-cooperation with the power elite. And we can get enough people conscious, and it won't take 100%, it will only take 10%. 10% active people engaged in this country can give us a new society.
3 million people, 1%. 3 million Americans would be a fair.
It's like a tipping point.
Well, my question is how to get to the tipping point. Is it, however, it's through media. Is that?
Yeah. We got a question here and a half.
Yeah, my question is, well, you know that a lot of us that are visually challenged, we use the internet for our media access. And I have an app in my phone that's called Newsline. That has all the newspapers in it, basically, all the stuff. But I asked Chris Smith last year, when are they going to put the Press Democrat in there? It is not in there. The Lake County Record B is in there. The Eureka Times is in there. The Sacramento Bee. I can just go down the list and there's no Press Democrat in the app called Newsline. So someone needs to work on that.
Well, you could work on it. If you could write a letter to the editor, you should challenge them, you know.
I've already spoke to Chris Smith and he was supposed to handle the problem.
Well,
He
Chris
works
Smith
with-
will handle whatever he wants to handle.
He does the walkabouts with the California, with the Red Empire Council of the Blind. He comes out and takes pictures and all this. And I asked him that needs to be up there. They have to contact Newsline themselves.
I think it's a big deal, myself.
It's not up to me to write an editorial to the press when that accessible thing should be in the Newsline system.
It should be. And a good letter to the editor might help stimulate that.
Well, I guess I could do that, but I didn't think that was necessary when it was an accessible issue.
What you just said right now would be a perfect letter to the editor.
Okay. Then I guess I have to email them again.
Yeah.
Yep.
Roger, you had your hand up?
No, I'm waiting for
Oh,
science.
okay.
I'm over his way. Well, just one other thing. I'm also an Occupy Sonoma County activist, and you know we've been chugging away here, organizing these events, and I'm so grateful for the Occupy movement in general that I think activated me in a way that I've been a dormant radical for 20 years, just kind of waiting for something to happen. You know, and it was like, woohoo! And, you know, and it doesn't take much to do a lot. I mean, 5 of us organized March Against Monsanto on May 25th in Santa Rosa, we got 1,000 people,
Great.
you know.
And it was mostly you.
Well, that's true. I pretty much organized the whole thing by myself, so, you know, it's doable. And I notice I like tabling in Sebastopol. I think there has to be some way in which outreach has to be fulfilling, versus when I went to the Vets building on Farmers Market Day with my March Against Monsanto flyers and stuff, people thought I was like a lunatic or something. I thought, well, I ain't gonna flyer here again. But then I thought the message needed to be a little different, to reach out to people that might look at my March Against Monsanto and not really even know what I meant by that.
Oh, that's a good point.
You know, like
Change
messaging.
the message.
I mean, not watering it down, but thinking, okay, not assuming that people don't care, you know, because I think people do care, but thinking of, okay, well, I probably needed to have a different message. I needed to reword that to be at the Vets building farmers market. Even though it was a farmers market, most folks had no idea what I was talking about. And, but I think the tipping point is 5 to 10%, really. You know, I mean, that's what they say about to get genetically modified organisms off our grocery shelves is for 5% of consumers is to stop buying them. Because they're ready. They have recipes and stuff ready to go to give us food that doesn't have GMOs in it. I mean, I want to ban them. I don't want to just label them. But I think that's true in a lot of different ways in terms of the snowball effect. But the work's hard. It can be, anyways. Yeah.
So, how did you turn out, what did you do to turn out 1,000 people?
You know what I found, and Emerald can speak to this too, because we're both Occupy Sonoma County activists, is we saturated Sonoma County with information about it. It was on Wacko, there were flyers everywhere. You know, there was a public service, there was a verbal thing on KPFA, it was in Wacko, it was on Facebook. You know, I think what we did is we just saturated Sonoma County. You know, I had 50 people put up 50 flyers, you know, at, you know, Whole Foods, Katati, G&G Market, the library, you know, so that I saw this woman who came to Juilliard Park on a bike and said, man, I saw this in like 5 different places.
Awesome.
You know, and I think it takes, you know, so in some ways I think Emerald and I have almost a blueprint for kind of what to do in terms of, they just need to, what do they say, people need to hear something 3 times before, 7 times, 9 times, oh boy. And I think getting people activated, I think they have to see it in a lot of different places. And it's actually not that hard to do, you just got to be focused about it and you know, and we kind of reviewed how we do afterwards, you know, kind of a post-action analysis, and, you know, what worked, what didn't work, you know, and we're organizing another one on October 12th, so we can, and I love that march through downtown. That was great, marching through the neighborhood and stuff, it was just awesome.
Talk about the few
Thanks.
people that have to talk
Well,
about.
I mean, kudos to you guys for that, because I've been to a whole lot of Occupy marches and events and everything, and at that last GMO march, I'm really happy to say I only recognized probably 5 faces.
Yeah.
I went rushing in, looking for friends, going, well, I don't know anybody, this is awesome, these are all new people.
Yeah.
How'd they get here? You know, so, yeah, thank you guys for that. Just quickly, my thing since Occupy began, what I've stayed really focused on is the banks and the housing crisis. That's been, I know you guys are on GMOs, we got the drone, you know, everybody's kind of got their little focus, and I think we all kind of came to that realization that we had to focus, because we were all, I think that's part of what Occupy faded, because we wore ourselves out, you know, essentially. But for the foreclosure crisis, just this week I looked on Zillow.com, right, the real estate website, and just the whole neighborhood surrounding the downtown area of homes for sale. And you can wave your mouse over every home for sale in this area. And I'm not, you know, probably half of what I saw. It'll show the house, the bedrooms, bath, and foreclosure. Probably half of what I saw in this surrounding downtown neighborhood.
Santa Rosa?
The houses that are on the market are in foreclosure, half. You know, and you could easily see it by going to Zillow. So my question is like, why is everybody still falling silently one by one in our community? You know, how is it that we have failed to unite this group? And I can say that, you know, Michael and I had the honor to travel together to Tunisia this past spring for the World Social Forum, where there were 50,000 people came from around the world to march in solidarity with the Tunisian people, and we had all kinds of workshops, 350 a day to choose from. And I focused on banking and housing, and I sat in a whole day of housing workshops from people around the world talking foreclosure from every continent. I listened to people from Poland, Germany, Spain, Kenya, Haiti, foreclosure, global. You know, I knew what's going on in some places, but it's huge. But so they put forward the country to speak that's having the most success in addressing the foreclosure crisis is Spain. And one of the key points that they said what they're doing in Spain is that if a house is being foreclosed on, the whole entire neighborhood goes collectively to the bank together to negotiate those homeowners being able to stay in their home. If they foreclose, anyways, the whole entire neighborhood reoccupies the home collectively. Now I'm seeing this happening in places like Detroit, in Minneapolis, where whole entire neighborhoods are uniting together. I think maybe some of it is this is predominantly a white, maybe there's some pride, maybe there's some shame, but still, I mean, how do we come together? Because that is the power that, we unite. And then again, the next step is like, what do we do? You know, my whole big thing right now is asking the bank to show me the note. Prove to me that you own it. What if everybody was asking for the note? That's what's been securitized, chopped off, sold around, whatever.
Did you hear about in Rhode Island, the governor of Rhode Island is making an eminent domain?
Richmond, the town of Richmond is calling for it. The mayor of Richmond.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, we need some dominoes to fall, Yeah, if one town like that, if Richmond has this success, that's a great angle, the eminent domain that the city, yeah.
I have a question. And are you based here in Sonoma County?
Yeah, I'm a homeowner a couple blocks away.
Okay.
Right?
And forgive my ignorance, but it's glaring. Would one, if one went on the internet and looked at homes in Cloverdale or Rohnert Park or any town, would the same kind of information likely be available right there?
Yeah, I mean, that was one thing that we were always wondering when we were doing a really active stuff on foreclosures, like, oh my gosh, how do we find the people that are in it?
Okay.
How do we know? So yes, Zillow.com, you can do any neighborhood and just wave your wand and it'll show you.
And you're concerned that the country, or Santa Rosa, and both,
The world.
are turning away from this, are no longer really concerned about it, or not thinking about it to a large extent. Yes?
I don't think anybody's not concerned. I don't think they're united in their concern.
You think, okay.
You mean the homeowners themselves, why aren't they binding together in a particular neighborhood and defending themselves against corporate power?
That's what I'm saying is where people are having more success, is where they're uniting, yes.
You know,
I'm guessing it's a lot of shame.
If this
And
meeting's about media and how to get the media
Right.
how to use the media to express what you're just talking about, then you come up with a great idea here, and you could write an op-ed. Let's say that there are 100 words or 150 words that you want to devote to what you understand about what's happening in neighborhoods around the world where people organize to save people from foreclosure, and how this is a crappy deal. That's a good deal, but to overcome a crappy deal. And you write op-eds unique to the circulation base of the Cloverdale Reveille, the Sonoma West Times and News, the Healdsburg Tribune, the Windsor Times, the Rohnert Park, whatever that paper is, the Santa Rosa Press Democrat, you gotta throw them in, they won't matter anyway. Sonoma Index Tribune, and you give each paper an op-ed that speaks to this issue, and it's illustrated by the fact that in Cloverdale, if you go 2 blocks a 2-block radius around downtown, there are 14 houses in foreclosure. Did you know? And people in many places are not standing for it. And you do the same thing for Sebastopol, Windsor, Guilsburg, Dublin, Park, Katati, Sonoma. And now you've informed a lot of people in the immediate community that you're dealing with about the extent of the problem and how to understand it, and some information on how other people around the world are coming to grips with it. So it's a neat one. It's a neat package.
Every TV coverage on foreclosures has been that foreclosures are down,
That's all I know.
and that's all they're saying.
There's,
But there's still thousands of them happening.
they're saying the housing
It's
crisis
doable.
is over.
I mean, I know the pieces of what I learned from the different countries. I took notes. I did a little live cast on the internet with that, but it would take a lot of time for me to map out every community and figure out how many homes are for.
I'll give you 7 students to help if you want to do it. Sir?
Mama bless, dude. But I'm really on is banking. Well, you got 7 more for me.
What's your
Yeah.
What's your name?
My name is Shelley.
Shelley.
Yeah.
Shelley, I did this for a county health program about 4 or 5 years ago. And it was part of a county program to get people to exercise, eat better food, things like that. And the first project was called I Walk. And he was trying to get people to walk. You don't have to lift weights, just please walk to be healthier. And the initial plan by the people in charge was to have a press conference. And I said, a press conference won't do shit. Because they never do. I mean, no one shows up. You don't have a lot of, it's not like 1935 in New York City with reporters everywhere. Papers are failing, they're small, they're far-flung. So a press conference around here is nuts. But what is doable, if you can fashion something unique to each community paper, and that's how you get stuff in this small local environment, and it worked. And that's the same thing you can do with this foreclosure stuff. I find what you told us, that's the biggest news on foreclosure that it's fantastic.
Yeah, that's banking.
Good one.
Well, and you know something, I think that connects the issues is fighting corporate power. Because on the March Against Monsanto flyer that I made for the one in October, it's, it says March Against GMOs Roundup in Corporate Power, and and that kind of captures sort of the poisons, the toxics, the stuff they're putting in our food, and just corporate power. And I think that's one thing that can link a lot of kind of issues together, and it's kind of like what you said about how to take the issue of this Hobbs vineyard and break it out past just the nice fuzzy, we don't want to spray pesticides on our kids, and that's to take it to the next level. And I think it's just going to be, and I was in Occupy Santa Rosa, and we were going everywhere and nowhere all at the same time. I think it was invaluable to have me where I am now, but it's hard to know how much and how little to do,
The most important thing that you said was that you do need about 10 people on any particular project. It's really important to take him up on those 7 students. Don't go off and say, oh, but I'd really rather do this. Do this.
Yeah.
Do the step, you have the backing.
I think it's great,
But
I think
I'm
we
not
need
done
an
with my
end goal.
statement, let me finish. So it's
I'm
10
interested.
people, and the fact is, when they advertised for the march, there were enough of our information spaces that people, with only 5 that you didn't know, showed up. Because there's a lot of people out there angry, and they're not coalesced under the same spaces where they're getting information. But that will coalesce as it becomes, 15% tend to go to this space, and only 1 or 2 dozen people go to that space. That space needs to then go with the places that are getting 15% if they're in agreement. They don't need to do it themselves. They can work, we can work in unity. And
Well,
in the
sure.
article.
Next week, I'm gonna have 4 teams of students, about 7 each. They're each gonna have to find a project. We've done Occupy before, we have done foreclosures before, but we looked at that maybe 5 years ago. Well, actually, it was like a year after the crash, and really took a hard look at the numbers of Latinos that were being pushed out. And found out there was one agency down in Marin that was selling, they sold $1 billion worth of subprimes. At half to Latinos. They hired Spanish-speaking people to go in and sell subprimes. Those people all lost their houses. So in Sonoma County, they got hit, Latinos got hit really hard. So we could research how many foreclosures there's been since the collapse, that it's still an ongoing problem, and get away from this mythology that things are getting better.
Let me just add one thing, but I think it's really important to do it, not in the big sense, not in the big picture, Sonoma County's big picture, but some of Sonoma County's big picture, but then zero in on find the circle around Sebastopol and Cloverdale and get Peter's kids to go talk to some of those folks.
Yeah.
And then you got some human beings involved. Today we're just talking about houses and money and banks and people like that. But there's human beings who are involved here. These are important stories. And big deals.
I can make a point just as well. Yeah, you're right.
Sis Jones has been waiting a long time.
Yeah, I have a question, but actually before, I just want to offer you a thought for if you do an article for a headline or one of the subsections, something like, how can Spain prevent your home from being foreclosed?
Oh, great, yeah.
So after you give the breakdown of what's happening, then that would be the headline for the solution. And then you can share what you saw. Anyway, my question is a few moments ago, Bob, you said that when you talk about the schools and the wineries, that was kind of a perfect storm issue. So my question would be, what if you don't have one like that? It's more abstract, it's more global, it's more whatever. How would you shift your strategy? If it's more complex, more systemic, what do you do in those cases?
I mean, the hard ones.
The hard ones, yeah.
I never liked the hard ones. Well, I mean, you try to figure out some way of bringing it to home. Let me give you an example.
Working on creating a world parliament to shift the way the world governs itself. So the forces up there, corporations, and G8s, and all that stuff becomes democratized instead of behind closed doors. Yeah. So.
And you're not a former, are you with the Foreign Service in another life?
I don't know. No, I'm on the board of an organization called the Democratic World Federalists, and part of the World Federalist movement that's been trying to do this since World War II.
And are they here?
We have a San Francisco branch, or San Francisco office.
It seemed to me years ago when I was living in Santa Rosa that there seemed to be an awful lot of retired Foreign Service people who would be interested in talking about that.
Good.
And there was one guy who I met who ran Bill Clinton's, one of his entities that was in Bosnia to try to straighten the country out. There's 2 guys. And if you got some people who have standing, who decide that they want to get together and talk about this and make it a great idea, maybe they could write an op-ed about it. An op-ed is a good way of doing it. But you're in a local environment there. I assume you're talking about how to deal with the local media. If you're talking about going to the New York Times, then it's much tougher.
Well, I mean, right now we have a website that, we get international press as well as email blasts with a national audience. But we haven't, focused on the local environment. Or we'd like to.
I see.
But it's a global issue, so it's.
Yeah.
How do you?
But if there was local people who were doing what you're doing, that could be of interest to them.
So do you put out a call for former Foreign Service people?
Well, I don't know. That's one idea. I mean, you might try Bruce Robinson at KRCB. Bruce talks about a lot of stuff, far-flung ideas and stuff. That's a start. Bruce Robinson. That's a tough one.
I know.
Thank you.
One thing that might just kind of helpful from a journalist perspective, articles, there's something that they teach you in journalism school, and journalists who don't go to journalism school probably just learn it, like, you know, on the job. There's a thing called the nut graph, and it's the paragraph right after the opening that gets you into the article, the catchy beginning. There's a paragraph or a sentence or two, someplace where the journalist tells you real clear why you're reading this article. Not just because the character they introduced you to at the beginning was catchy or a flashy sort of opening, but it's called the nut paragraph because it's the nut of the story, where this fits into the broader picture. You know, such and so-and-so's family is one of 50,000 this year in Sonoma County that has faced this similar circumstance. And in a way, for framing something like you're saying, it seems like to look for that broader, what is the nut, what's the core of this story, is a way that you could help frame a PR campaign, like in a post-Occupy or in today's efforts to find more accountable government, this project is part of is part of that trend of many local and regional groups that are trying to hold government more accountable. Like finding sort of where something fits into a trend pattern. Journalists are always looking at trends and how this protest fits into something bigger happening. Not just this, like, okay, why is this important? Because it's part of a broader trend. That's just something, a way that journalists have as a lens on the world. They look at sort of, where is this in context to something else? Show me why this is important. And if there are hot current events happening, like around the world, people are clamoring for more accountable government and overthrowing regimes right now, actively, to get it. It's a very hot topic. And like Shelley, another subject, which is why it might be hard for her to pursue the housing crisis, she's helping organize a public banking forum in about a month here, mid-September, to bring public banking to Sonoma County as a kind of a pilot county. And,
How do we contact you?
Please don't.
but talk about, she's like spearheading that, tons of work. But like that context is the context is kind of like made easy for you because it's like we're in a society of criminal banks that have done this and this and this. You just can lay out the evidence. How much Chase and Citigroup and Wells Fargo and Bank of America, we don't want to invest our public money in these criminal, illegal foreclosure and derivatives, cartels, essentially. We want public banks. It's like the context for that's really clear, so it should be a good sell.
So the month of September
Yeah, that's an easy
in
one.
Sonoma County is Invest Local Month. There's a whole group of folks that are working on putting on a whole series of workshops on investing locally, how to invest our dollars locally in local businesses. I just moved my money from, Vanguard to a local organic farming project, much to my father's dismay, but so it's Invest Local Month, and there's I believe that there's a calendar online of all the different events happening. There's going to be bus tours to local businesses for investors to learn about how to invest in these local endeavors here. So we want to kind of pilot with that, have one or two spots where we're talking about public banking, and that's how local city, county, state funds can also be invested locally. And the Public Banking Institute had this slogan going for a while where there was the Move Your Money campaign. They're starting the Move Our Money campaign, move our city money, move our county money out of Wells Fargo, out of B of A, into our local banks and local credit unions that can support our local community. All that stays here. It's loaned back right to the community at low rates, and that's the whole model. So
So is there a website for it? To find
well, there's a Public Banking Institute to learn more about public banking, but I think it's being hosted through Share Exchange.
Oh, okay.
Check in with the Share Exchange. Andy Schneckschneider is putting the whole thing on.
I think I read in the paper somewhere recently that the first public bank in the United States had just opened, state-owned or something like that.
South Dakota just opened?
Did South just open?
No, hold on, time out. Mark, Mike,
Yes.
not that, North Dakota Public Bank's been open 94 years, but Occupy.com, you guys just ran an article
There's an
on,
Occupy Money Cooperative, it's a whole new, they're gonna have debit cards that are.
yeah, I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, a money cooperative, that's a different, yeah. Which is complicated but they're gonna get it off the ground where you can.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a public banking, seminar training at Dominican a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Emerald said one thing we should cover before we wrap up, and we want to do that in about 10-15 minutes, was about interviewing, which we really haven't talked a lot about at this point. And I'll say one thing. Interviewing for journalism is different than the kind of interviewing we do in investigative research. Interviewing for journalism requires some preparation. And Bob would probably do this better than me because you've done a lot of interviews in journalism specifically. But it's really only a few key questions. You pick a location, you meet a person there. Did you tape? You just take notes?
Not really.
Not really. You just took notes. Usually that's.
If you have if you're doing a big personality piece,
Right.
it takes a lot of time to transfer.
It does, that's what, yeah. But and you ask some of the hardest questions right up front. A little getting to say hi, but the person knows why you're there, what's important. You have 3 or 4 questions that you want to really hit. And then you can always say, tell me more about this, and probe. But it's pretty straightforward. Now in research, we will have an interview guide, and we'll lay out 8 or 9 questions. And then we'll practice those. And a question it's not 2 questions in one, it's only 1 question. So it's not ambiguous at all. If you have 2 things you want to talk about, then ask another question. But we'll interview with 8 or 9 questions. We interviewed all the department chairs at Sonoma State. Well, actually, only 18 would talk to us. And 16 of those 18 said that there was a qualitative reduction in instruction at Sonoma State because of the Green Music Center.
Because of what?
Because of the Green Music Center. And we didn't put them all in a room and have them raise their hand. We went individually to each one, had these sets of questions. They were anonymous, so their names weren't used. But then we were able to make the front page of the paper say, the student paper, that, the department chairs say that there's been an impact on instruction. And there certainly has been. And I said it was because of spending $150 million on GMC.
Impact on instruction, how? What do you mean?
There was I could read the whole thing, but numbers of student faculty ratios, everything was dramatically impacted. We interviewed 20 people in Occupy, same sort of setup, multiple in-depth interviews. Then we looked for what they shared in commonality, and a lot of it was kind of a new world, a vision for the world that was different, a world of greater equality, things like that. So if you interview 20 people, then you can say that this group of people tend to think that. And so, but it's a lot more work than you have to transcribe. So an interview for just writing an article is as few as 3 or 4 questions. It can be anywhere from 10 minutes, 5 minutes to 2 hours. And you answered that, Bob, because you really are the one that done it.
Well, I think normally, before you start an interview, you want to have some idea, some knowledge about what you're talking to this person about, who this person is, and stuff like that. And just have a conversation. I think for news interviews, having a bunch of prepared questions, that's stilted. You don't really get the human being out of it, and oftentimes, it just never seemed to work. But just want to talk to people, and one primary rule that I learned after some time is that the minute you close your pen and put it in your pocket, kind of fold your notebook, that's when the guy says, and after I shot her, you take out your pen and say, well, after you shot her what? Well, you know, it seems like every time you start to end an interview, people open up, and you end up taking out your notebook again and continue to stuff. One thing, you know, you spoke earlier about a reporter talked to you and you weren't quite sure what to say. Were you one of the organizers of the event or just there?
I was just there.
Okay, so I think in your situation, you probably could have given what the reporter really wanted, and that is why you were there from your heart. And that's oftentimes much better than you know, the information officer for this organization here who's going to give you the 1, 2, 3. You're going to give something from your heart, and that's going to probably make the paper, and that's going to make the story about the event that you have embraced important. So in that respect, I don't think you should be afraid to speak your mind and open up your heart, and that'll be good stuff. And if you don't know, you say, I don't know, that's the guy, the organizer over there, go talk to him. But for me, I'm trying to say, well, I got grandkids. And they go, I have grandkids, she said. What's your name? Oh, I see. And then the story has a human being in it. You provide the human.
And so for her foreclosure issues, perhaps, then it would be good to go around to the different people in the neighborhood whose homes are being foreclosed, get their personal stories, and somehow have a newspaper or some,
A lot of times they're gone, but if you can.
That's what I was just gonna say. If it says foreclosed, it's already been foreclosed. So two pieces to that. You know, the ones that are still in their homes, often, they're the ones that are short selling. And how you can tell by looking at a real estate website if they're in a short sale is if there's one picture from the outside. They're still in there.
yeah.
You know, the ones that are foreclosed, those are the ones you can see the whole house because, I mean, they're gone. And a lot of those, you know, as we know, the banks are still holding, they're not even on the market.
Right, I was just trying to think of how you could use those
But,
kinds
yeah, it's
of
the
theme
short sale
stories.
people that are still in their homes that can use some help. But on both sides, what I'm dialing into right now is the note factor. So the ones that are still in their homes, there could be a campaign, you know, to show me the note. That's, you know, myself personally, I just wrote to Wells Fargo and said, show me the note. They wrote back to me and said, if you want to see the note, you have to come to San Antonio, Texas with a subpoena with a 5 to 7 day advance notice that you're coming. And when you come, you can only see it, you can't touch it, and you can't have possession. The letter says this, you know. And I got a second letter from them.
That itself's a good story.
I got a second letter from them this week saying, actually, there's a law that says we don't have to show you the note. This case is closed. The letter ends with this case is closed. But if everybody was asking to show me the note, I just told Michael, I want a lawyer to write a show me the note article that gets that on a deep level, you know. A congressman, I don't know if they're that far. I mean, I don't know, but you know that if everybody collectively starts to demand proof of ownership, that millions of these homes that have been foreclosed on, the banks did not hold the note. They don't even have the legal and lawful ownership, especially if it's gone through this change of, you know, Wachovia, World, Wealth, you know, Countrywide. If it's gone through chains, it's been chopped up before those big banks bought out those failing investment firms, most likely, you know. So I think that, yeah, I'm having just this vision of this whole, like really a nationwide campaign. I do like the idea of what you guys are proposing, that we, you know, again, I keep having this fantasy that Sonoma County is going to be the second place to have a public bank after North Dakota. And we're going to, you know, be able to educate people about how we do it. But, you know, the foreclosure thing too, what is something that everybody can be doing collectively? And maybe if we're learning how to find those people in short sale, connect with them, have a collective action, because if we are gonna do that research, what's the end goal? What are we gonna do once we find them? We have to know that as well.
I think it's very important that there be a number of local resistances before you try and go national. You need to have a network. And so, as much as your eye is on the prize, you have to do it here. And the same thing happened, Yes on 37 was maybe about 12 communities that got excited and communicated with each other, and then it was a statewide thing. And even though it got voted down, it created a furor all over the country. And it was those 12 communities that started it. You have to get, there is